Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. So in this video I'm going to do a walk around of the splitter I built. I designed and built this thing completely myself right here in the garage. From start to the point it's at took me about 4.5 months or so. Obviously it's not completely finished. I got to paint it yet. I want to put some fenders on it, probably some lights. And you'll notice I also have the push block off of the cylinder here, and that is because I bent it. So I'm working on that. I've got a video which I'll throw in the end screen of this one if you want to take a look at that and what I'm doing with that. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start right on top with the cylinder. This is a 6-inch cylinder. It has a 22.5-inch stroke. This is the only piece I used off of a log splitter I had bought used for 150 bucks, and it was another homemade splitter. And the reason why it's so cheap is because the cylinder was damaged. There was a nick in the piston, which I did repair myself. I put all new seals in it, and good to go with that. I've got Prince valves on it here. This one's for the cylinder out, and it auto detents back in. Once the cylinder is all the way in, it'll build pressure to whatever the valve is rated for, probably around 600 pounds or so, and it kicks it back to the neutral position. You can get these obviously with the auto, so they detent out and in, but I didn't really like the idea of having that thing travel out, and if my hands are caught doing something, I wouldn't be able to stop it. So if I let go of this, it stops where it is in the push. So I preferred it that way, so I chose that. The other two, this one's for the log lift. It has a hydraulic log lift on it, and then this one's for the hydraulic 4-way wedge, which is right there. I also have a fluid-filled pressure gauge right here. I have restrictors on these cylinders because they're significantly smaller than the big cylinder, and the pump, which is right there, is 28 gallons per minute. So these things would cycle way too fast without restriction. So that's what those are. The frame is 2x3 3/16 wall box steel. The axle and springs are a 3,000 pound axle, bought it new. Originally I had planned on going a little bit wider with the frame and axle of this thing. So I did end up cutting a foot. You can kind of see it right in there. Maybe not. I cut a foot out of the axle and welded it back together to narrow it up to what I wanted. So you guys might wonder why I've got two hoses on each end of the cylinder. The reason being is because I'm running a dump valve, which is right there. And what that does is it allows some of the fluid to go right back to the return to the tank, sort of bypassing the valve. And the reason why you'd want to do something like that is typically for heat. And what happens here is when you're filling the static end of the cylinder, you're filling the volume of the tube itself. When you're filling the rod end, you have the volume of the rod, which takes up volume. So, if you put 28 gallons per minute in here, you're going to get more than 28 out. So instead of having all that trying to funnel through this valve and heating up because of restriction, that dump valve opens, sends it back to the tank. So I opted for that. You'll notice the fuel tank's kind of hokey pokey here. Well, the engine came from a lawnmower. I bought a used lawn tractor with a bad transaxle for $100, and I used the engine, which this is a Briggs Vanguard 18 horse twin cylinder vertical shaft. I also used the solenoid and the battery. Obviously I bought that battery enclosure, but the battery was good enough to use. I used the throttle, the key, and the choke from the tractor too. I took that out of the dash. I made this little plate, rounded the edges here, and mounted it underneath this baffle that was on top of the engine. I was thinking about putting this stuff back by the valves, but I didn't really like all the cabling coming across the engine there. So I just decided to go ahead and mount it right there. I thought, you know what, every time I start this thing, I should be checking oil anyways. Put it all right here, and I have no issues with that. It works just fine. This is temporary. This is the fuel tank off the tractor. It's like maybe 2 gallons, I think. I've got it temporarily mounted with clamps there, just held in place. The idea was to come off of this tube here with some sort of bracket. There's a better look at the dump valve, by the way, and I've got a filter in it. Come off this bracket and hold like a 5 or 10 gallon fuel cell, maybe off of a race car or something if I could find something used. That was the idea there. Moving on, 28 gallon per minute pump, as I mentioned. I did build the adapter between the engine and the pump myself. So this is a piece of 4-inch, it's actually sprinkler pipe that's in there. I've got a notch in there, and you can see in there I've got Lovejoy in between the pump and the shaft of the engine. So this is welded right to this plate here, and that is bolted to this mount, engine mount. You can see I've got rubber in there as well to try to isolate some vibration. Fully electric start, just like it is in a tractor. Coming up front here, this piece is the lower portion of my log lifter, and then this piece here is the catch cradle. So this thing lifts out and slides in the back there, which when we get around back I'll show you where that goes, and when you split it, it catches it, and it just keeps the pieces from hitting the ground right away. So you can actually split probably 3 or 4 pieces and it'll all be on this table. So instead of bending over to pick everything up, it's right there. So that's kind of nice. The reason why I have them up here is a couple of reasons. 1, for space, and 2, because I needed extra tongue weight because the beam overhangs on the backside, so I had to move some weight up front. So that helped out a lot. Standard tongue jack. You'll notice I do have a cut and a weld in that tongue piece, and that was when I was building this frame. It's actually cut on a 45. I had thought that I was going to have to offset this tongue to get a certain height, hitch height, that I was looking for, and once I got everything put together, that wasn't the case. So I welded a piece back on and then gusseted, put gusset plates on both sides. Just got a standard 2-inch coupler bolted on. Did not weld it in case I damage it. So here's a look at the back side of that catch cradle. And again, these, you'll see I got a little stop welded here, so that stops it, and I do have a hole drilled through. So the pins are in the back side, which I'll show you, but I could put them through here for travel. I have not towed this thing down the road yet. I've just taken it out of the garage and so forth, so I haven't needed to put those pins in yet. The wheels and tires I bought new. Those did not come with the axle. Bought those separately. I've got, this is either a 25 or 30 gallon tank on here, hydraulic tank. I don't remember what it is. I know it's somewhere in that range, either 25 or 30. This one was right around 200 bucks. Has a drain on it, but it does not have a sight glass or a temperature gauge, which is sometimes handy. You'll hear a lot of opinion on this, whether you need a tank this big or not. That's going to be your choice if you're getting into building a splitter, I guess. It depends on what climate you're in, what temperature you're going to be using it on, your valving, your hydraulic setup, you know, where you're creating heat and things. But I will say, even with the dump valve and everything I got going on here, this thing does get warm enough to the point where you really don't want to keep your hand on it for very long. So bear that in mind. So that's a lot of oil in there, and that's the idea, is that it allows it to cool before it's recycled right back, you know, into the unit a little bit. One other thing I wanted to mention, I do have, you can't really see it, there's a valve right there, and there's another one right there. The reason why I did that on the supply and the return is so I can isolate any of the hydraulics. So if I got a problem with something out here and I need to work on it, I can close those valves and I don't have to worry about losing all my fluid. So I put a valve in there for those reasons. I did put sleeving on some of the hydraulic hoses, you'll notice that. When this log lift pivots upwards, those hoses are going to travel with the cylinder, obviously, so did that for some protection there. I did tap these out and put greasable points in most of the pivot points. One other thing I wanted to mention. The static end of the cylinder here, these are 5/8 plates. When I put those on, when I made these, I cut them into this beam. So I cut out the footprint of what this is in the top of this beam and recessed them in the beam. So it's not just all the loads applied to these welds. They are set into that beam, so that helps with strength. The welds, you can see there's kind of dirty, but there's multiple welds there. Everything was welded with a Lincoln 216 wire welder. The structural welds, which are frame and anything related to the hydraulics, I did with 045 gas shielded flux core, which has roughly the tensile strength of a 70-18 rod. Moving back up, I should say moving back, here you can see the adjustable 4-way wedge I have. So in the down position, which it is in the down position, this is flush with the top of this. So these wouldn't apply in this case. So you can just use the vertical wedge if you want. Then you can hydraulically adjust this to any height you want, it comes up to 12 inches high. And then here's a look at what that looks like down here. I've got a little cylinder in there, all greasable points. Again, I made all these brackets, everything myself. I laid this all out on plywood, everything. This pin here, right now that cylinder is extended. So it extends a little further than what it is right here. So this will actually come free from this plate, which allows me to pull that right out if I wanted to. And I wanted to be able to do that so I could put a 6-way wedge or build a 6-way wedge or something. I could have a different wedge for it if I opted to. So that way I could just pull this out, put the 6-way in, and away you go. I've got expanded metal on here. And here's a look at the cylinder for the log lift. Again, you can see the grease there. All greasable points. I don't know if I mentioned it, but the I-beam is 10 by 10 by 5/8. This is all 1-inch material back here. These. This was one solid piece. I cut these 2 pieces out of it, cut the profile in it. The only thing I didn't do was the angle here. My uncle is a machinist, and he machined a 60-degree angle on this 1-inch piece for me. This is A36 steel, by the way. These 2 pieces I bought. This is 1-inch by 8-inch, as well as these 2 are identical. I forget what these are. They're hardened. They're not the same. They're not the same material as this. But they did come with this profile on it. And I shouldn't say hardened. They're not hardened. They're just harder than this is. I did cut a little bit of an angle on them, which you can see, so I could cant them. And the reason why I did that is because I set these back. So the idea is that in the 4-way position, the log would crack here and then encounter these. And I wanted it to hit out here first to take a little pressure off of everything. And how I did this whole thing is 1/2-inch plate. So I got a 1/2-inch plate here, 1/2-inch plate here, and those are spaced apart appropriately to let that piece slide up and down. So just slightly bigger than 1 inch there. And I've got multiple welds on the back side there, which you can't really see. And then here, these two pieces of square stock are where that log cradle slides in, and then the pins you can see I've got in there. And then these pins have a detent ball on the end of them, so that's what keeps them in place. This log cradle, I was kind of flirting around with the idea of not doing this when I first built it, but I'm glad I did. I really like that. It's nice. When you lift the log lift up and a big piece rolls down, you don't have to try to, usually I'm standing right here, obviously working the valves, I don't have to try and catch it or whatever. I can let it, bump into this and just center it where I want, get the wedge where I want, and away you go. So it works out pretty slick. I'm pretty happy with it. Right off the bat, I mean, I got pretty lucky with everything working out, and it's efficient. It's certainly efficient. It works well. So the only issue I had was with the push block, and I really wouldn't have had that issue hadn't I had a piece that pushed right up on the top of it, and it was kind of foolish on my part to use it like that, but I did, and I ended up, it was a big knot, and I ended up bending it. So had I not done that, it'd probably still be just fine. However, I am fixing it, and I will put some gusseting in it to strengthen it. So if that does happen again, hopefully it won't bend. So that's really it, guys. Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'll answer them for you. If there's anything you want to know, or, hey, do you like this or not like that? Or if you guys got any ideas, hey, here's an idea that this worked good for me or whatever, go ahead and drop that in there too. I'd like to hear it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.